we're a little bit thin. I think we might have some people joining on WebEx, or they might be at home resting because we think sickness is taking its toll on the entire legislature right now. But first item would be request for bill introductions, and I have one to start off with. This is on behalf of Kansas Action for Children, and it is 25 RS 0735, and this is a child tax credit bill. Do we have any questions? Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to request RS.
Oh, hold on just a second. I'll take questions on my introduction.
Oh, questions. I'm so sorry. I'm so tired.
Okay, without objection, the request is approved now. Representative Howerton.
Thank you. I just want to get this day over with, Chairman. Okay. So I'd like to request RS 0434. It is the bill that would create a Star Bond Sales Tax Replacement Fund. It's on behalf of City of Derby. 00034.
All right, committee questions. Representative Clayton.
Not a question, just asking you to repeat it because it's hard to hear on this side of the room. Thank you.
Sorry. The number is RS 0434. It is a bill that would create a Star Bond Sales Tax Replacement Fund requested on behalf of the City of Derby.
Okay, committee, any questions? Okay, without objection, the request is approved. Any other requests for bill introductions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I respectfully appear before you representing the Kansas Association of Community Foundations. They would like to request introduction with an RS number of a bill with an RS number of 0301, so 25 RS 0301. And that bill would enact the Endow Kansas Tax Credit Act for community foundation endowment funds.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, without objection, the request is approved. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee. Jessica Lucas on behalf of the Kansas Coalition for Sexual and Domestic Violence, asking to introduce RS 0565, which would provide a sales tax exemption for sexual assault centers. Thanks.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Without objection, the request is approved. Any further requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our hearing on House Bill 2083, and I'll turn to the revisor's office for an overview on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2083 would provide a property tax exemption for new energy storage systems and would exclude new energy storage systems from the commercial and industrial machinery and equipment exemption that currently exists. Under Section 1 of the bill, there would be an exclusion from the commercial industrial machinery and equipment property tax exemption for any new energy storage system, which is a defined term. The property tax exclusion would not apply to an energy storage system that received the necessary county approval prior to January 1 of 2026. Additionally, an electric generation facility addition would now qualify under the commercial and industrial machinery and equipment property tax exemption. Section 2 of the bill would provide a 10-year property tax exemption for any new energy storage systems. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sievers. Committee, are there any questions for the revisor? Representative Francis.
So I'm just trying to understand all of these different terminologies that all sound the same to me. So we're going to exclude them from the commercial and industrial machinery and equipment property tax exemption for any new energy storage system. But then they will now qualify for commercial and industrial machinery and equipment property tax exemption. What are we doing here? Are they going to be, are we going to make it in statute so that they won't get the standard equipment exemption, like what we're seeing in rural Kansas for some of the ethanol plants?
Thank you. From my reading of the bill, and the proponents may be able to provide more insight as to the exact reason of this, there might be, some of these may qualify under the current CIME, is what is commonly referred to as Commercial Industrial Machinery and Equipment Exemption. So essentially, some of these entities will be pulled out of what currently exists and given the new 10-year exemption, property tax exemption, that's being established under law. Currently, the CIME exemption has no term of years, it's indefinite. I can't really state the exact reason. They provide a definition of what will be encompassed here. So it's, to my understanding, it might be a little more broad, but I'd probably let the proponents explain exactly their reasoning.
But the way it's drafted, they'll be able to go onto the property tax rolls at the expiration of the exemption?
Yes, it would be a 10-year exemption for these properties.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. I'll turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. There are currently no energy storage systems in operation in Kansas, and therefore then we were not able to provide an impact.
Thanks. I guess I should have just asked if there was any objection to waiving the fiscal note, but thank you, Kathleen. At this time, we'll open up the proponent section of our testimony and welcome, are you tag teaming it, Josh and Kimberly Swati?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's okay, it's Josh Swati this afternoon. Appreciate being here in front of the Tax Committee. I am Joshua Swati here on behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance. And it's very rare for me to be in front of the House Tax Committee, but it's actually also a little exciting because once I think we explain what's going on, hopefully you'll all understand why we're here and why this is a good time to fix this confusion in the law and make it clear moving forward. So I am here on behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance. The Advanced Power Alliance is the association of the developers, the operators, the engineers, financiers, and purchasers involved in the advanced energy economy. We have invested more than $20 billion in the state of Kansas and have created 20,000 direct and indirect jobs. You know us as the developers of wind and solar, sometimes even more recently in potential hydrogen facilities, but 2083, House Bill 2083 is in part a reaction to the very fast-moving changes that are moving in our energy economy. In 2024, last year, this committee passed House Bill 2609, which was then moved into another tax bill and ultimately signed and passed by the governor. 2609's effort was to standardize the property tax among all the different generation types that we have in Kansas so that they all had that same 10-year exemption. So if it was natural gas generation, wind generation, solar, et cetera, they all had the same. The area that 2609 did not address, and it did not address because at the time it was still just a very emerging industry, was energy storage systems. And so within just a 12-month period, this has become a very exciting opportunity for the state of Kansas, and we've seen an enormous amount of interest in investing in the state of Kansas. But also along with that, there were some questions of how exactly energy storage systems were to be treated from a tax standpoint. Because energy storage is an emerging industry, the tax status is unclear. The Department of Revenue last fall issued a guidance document suggesting that energy storage systems might qualify for the commercial industrial machinery and equipment property tax exemption, which, as you know, is for the lifetime of a project. They also said that they may not, and then a critical component of that is that you don't find that out until after the project is built and completed, you go and ask the Board of Tax Appeals what that tax status is. So one of the reasons we wanted to make sure this hearing happened and we explained this to you is that it's important to understand these battery energy storage systems can be upwards of $200, $300, or $400 million investments. They tend to be on small footprints. Say a 200 or 300 megawatt storage facility is going to be on less than a 20-acre footprint. And they're going to look like basically the shipping containers, and depending on the size of the battery storage system, it is going to be that number of shipping containers. But they are very valuable, and no financial investor is going to invest $400 million in a facility and not know what its tax status is until after that is built, at which point you go in front of the Board of Tax Appeals and make that request. Furthermore, we as an industry said, if you have a situation where these may qualify for a lifetime property tax exemption, or they may also not qualify for a lifetime property tax exemption, you all understand this as members of the House Tax Committee. You can use your imagination here. If a battery storage facility was built in such a way that it did qualify for a lifetime property tax exemption, you could imagine everyone's going to build their battery storage facilities in such a way. And I would also say, and this is a great thing for Kansas, that we anticipate into the billions of dollars in battery energy storage systems coming into the state within the next 5 years. And so we as an industry decided, similar to the back history of House Bill 2609, we should come in front of this committee right now and get this clarified before it becomes a larger question and further down the line in the years. And I give that back history because I was actually in the Kansas House of Representatives in 2002, which was only 6 years after the state passed a lifetime property tax exemption for wind energy. And at the time, they thought, well, we're only going to have 1 or 2 wind farms. And it was in 2015 that the industry had to come again in front of the legislature and say, it is definitely time that we change this tax status and move to a 10-year tax abatement rather than a lifetime property tax abatement situation. So in one of the rare instances of your job on the House Tax Committee, you actually have the opportunity to fix this before it becomes an actual problem, because we are just at the beginning of what we intend to see in terms of investment. These battery storage systems are very valuable to the grid, and they are also very valuable to your ratepayers because our power is priced in 5-minute intervals, and as you can imagine, at 2:30 a.m. in the morning, when hardly anyone has anything on, power is very cheap. At 5 in the afternoon, when it's very hot and everyone's running their air conditioning, power is more expensive. And batteries can take that power off the grid in the middle of the night when it's very cheap and then inject it back onto the grid, so they provide additional value to those generation sources in the middle of the night and then provide value to the ratepayers in the middle of the afternoon so that we don't have to pull in power from neighboring regional transmission organizations if it should get to that situation. So they provide a very valuable function. A few other things that I'll explain on battery systems, just so that you understand how they work. If you hear someone say, well, this is a 200 megawatt battery system with a 4-hour charge, it doesn't just mean that it only charges for 4 hours and then that's it. What it means that if the grid were to ask for that full 200 megawatts, it could provide 200 megawatts onto the grid for 4 hours or 2 hours. But in reality, how they are used is more as sort of a metering out of that power to help stabilize the grid across the entire regional transmission organization. They have built a number of these facilities in Texas, and they have proven invaluable in maintaining Texas's grid as ERCOT works through its growing pains that you are all familiar with over the last few years. And so they are significant to the future of how our grid stays stabilized so that everybody can make sure that we have power on all the time and that our costs are as levelized as possible. One thing I would ask to point out, when we drafted the bill, Typical of most tax bills, we did not want to be retroactive. So we wrote it to take effect for the two instances that it refers to the bill. We wrote it to take effect on January 1 of 2026, or it says any entity that has not received a permit from a county prior to January 1, 2026. We would respectfully request the committee, if you choose to work the bill, which we would request that you do, to actually change that to January 1, 2025, because the pace of these battery storage systems coming into the state of Kansas is fast enough that we want to make sure that the law is very clear. And there's no question as to what tax status they have, and that everyone is playing under the very same playing field that the generation sources are working under that you all passed last year. And so to Representative Francis, your question earlier, that's why you'll notice in the bill it switches from the statute that addresses CIME, and then we move these with a clear definition of what an energy storage system is, we move them under the same section that House Bill 2609 that you all passed into last year is, so that it's abundantly clear where they fall in the tax status. So I think that covers my formal comments. There is a presenter after me that is a direct representative of a battery energy storage company. So she will also be a great resource for you for questions if you are curious about these systems, but I would stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. I think we'll go ahead and take questions at this point. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, of course, for years, the rap on your industry has been, well, it's fine when the wind blows, but when the wind doesn't blow, what happens? Are you telling me now with these new batteries, this problem is solved and you will be able to provide energy 24/7 no matter what the wind's doing?
So I would say, and that's a great question. As a matter of fact, this is a great opportunity that I forgot to raise. Energy storage systems are power agnostic. So the beauty of them is they actually work on any generation source. And so they are basically a market arbitrage for any generation source. So if you have a coal plant that is operating at night, because it's hard to ramp coal plants up and down very fast. If you have a coal plant that's generating power in the middle of the night and it happens to go price negative because there's so much power on the grid, a battery energy storage system near it would be able to take that very cheap power off the grid, provide some additional value to that power, and put it back on. But yes, it can also do it for wind farms or solar farms or any other generation source. I think that's why all utility operators are beginning to see the value of battery energy storage systems is because they levelize those costs of all the different generation sources.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd just like to commend, it's not very often the tax committee has somebody coming in willing to give up a lifetime exemption. So I commend you and whoever made the decision to bring this before the committee on trying to create some uniform and standard policy with generation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would say if this were one or two battery energy storage systems, we may not have done it, but we expect these to be nearly ubiquitous statewide in the next decade because they're so valuable. And with that much investment, we didn't want mass confusion. Yeah.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And nothing in this bill will preclude the county where one of these might be placed for negotiating payment in lieu of taxes to address maybe road issues. I'm sure these things are extremely heavy.
So these are, they're also, as I would say, thank you, Mr. Chairman, they are also, I call them the holy grail of sort of advanced energy investments because they're a smaller footprint. The units themselves are pretty heavy when they're brought in, but then they go on to concrete plinths and are stable. But yes, a payment, we would call it a donation agreement, but donation agreements would be negotiated with the counties for those first 10 years.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. What would be your lifespan of your battery packages?
So thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question was, what was the lifespan? Right now, most of these are being planned for around a 25-year lifespan. I would say that in terms of an overall energy investment portfolio, there's an enormous amount of money going into research and development of these energy storage systems. And so every successive year, we would likely see longer charge durations, longer lifespans of the energy storage systems, and then the next iteration would probably be, less reliance on rare earth minerals. There's a lot of investment dollars going into a battery energy storage system that would be made from cheap component parts. Or readily, I shouldn't say cheap, readily available component parts.
So
Yep.
just like in solar and sun, would you have to go through the county commissioners? No, you think most of these will be on private ground or ground already purchased?
These, I should say, if these are being developed independent of a utility, and here's where I'm about to get out of my skis and the other person may get up behind me, but most of these are going to be permitted at the county level. I can't answer specifically, say, if an incumbent utility were going to build one. Usually they are located close to a substation. I'm not sure if an incumbent utility would have to go through that same siting process, but an independent power producer or an energy storage producer would go through the county permit process.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Josh. So these would be, you would bank energy when prices are low, and you would sell it when prices are high. So who owns the energy that's in the battery?
I may defer to our next conferee. She is probably going to know that better. And there are different market iterations of how these work. There are independent arbitrage companies that I think would be buying off of the grid and then selling back onto the grid. But there's also an arrangement probably where there's a contractual arrangement with that incumbent utility where you're holding it for them. But she would be able to answer those questions better than I can.
Okay, because yeah, I would think some of your other projects, wind or solar, you typically have some kind of a purchase power agreement so that you're knowing when you're building it that you've got a buyer for your product. Is that, you don't know if that same thing is true with these? Are they building them just to make money on the swing? That's why I'm asking who owns the energy. Somebody's making money selling high and buying low, right?
This is certainly an appropriate question for the next conferee. She's going to know sort of exactly how those market situations work.
And you talked about grid stabilization. Does the SPP have a position on this? Have they said build these, or where are they at?
I certainly do not speak for the Southwest Power Pool. I do know that there is great value placed on what these can do, particularly in times of extreme weather events, because they are able to put power on let's say if multiple units are taken offline, they're able to help stabilize those. And those are also, opportunities for them to make money as well. But they are crucially important then to keeping the grid stabilized. The Southwest Power Pool, part of the reason that we still need some sort of incentive structure is that the Southwest Power Pool is still working through how they're exactly going to be accounted for. And they are very expensive investments to put in place, but they're also very important.
And if I could, one more. The chairman mentioned you were giving up a lifetime exemption for a 10, but it's unknown. I mean, that's why you're here, is because you don't know if that exemption is going to come true, and they want some certainty, right?
Certainty is crucial, and I think all of you would understand that, particularly with multiple $100 million investments. You can't go into it not knowing. Yeah.
Representative Butler.
So the question was, where are these energy storage systems coming from? They are stacked batteries, not dissimilar from electric vehicle batteries. Tesla is the largest domestic manufacturer of the units, but they do not manufacture them here in the state of Kansas. To my knowledge, there are no known energy storage system manufacturers here in the state of Kansas. There are research projects associated, and if you'll notice in the definition, it includes electrochemical batteries, but it also includes gravitational batteries. There is a lot of R&D going into different methods of storing energy, pumped air, pumped water, even, pumping up a very heavy weight and then slowly allowing it to go down. So that's why the definition was trying to capture those, and those could potentially be manufactured here. But in terms of the units that are being installed right now around the country that would be installed in Kansas, there are no manufacturers here.
Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was answered with the 25-year lifespan, but what about battery disposal? Are they recycled? What do we do with them after they're no longer useful?
It is my understanding that those component parts are recycled, and that would be a great question for the next conferee as well. And the only other thing, I'm glad you asked a question, Representative Wolf, there is one operating battery storage unit in the state of Kansas right now. It is in the city of Minneapolis, Kansas. It's a 4-megawatt unit, so it's very small relative to the size of these, but it's the exact same technology. And more of us would have been there on the day that facility was dedicated, but that was December 15th, 2021, and if anyone remembers their history, there was a 90-mile-an-hour straight line wind that day that started fires all across. So a difficult day to dedicate a battery storage system, but that is the one facility that's been operating in the state of Kansas. And that's municipally owned, that facility, so it has a different tax structure.
I may have been a commissioner there, but I did not know that. I knew that they had their own electrical, but I didn't know that was how. Thank you.
All right, well, our next conferee, she's been online for a while, so maybe she's been listening, and we'll be able to address some of these questions, but thank you for your testimony. Our next conferee is joining us via WebEx. Polly Shaw, are you there?
I am. I'm having a little bit of trouble getting the video to work suddenly. It's asking me for a FaceTime camera. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Good afternoon. Ready for me to speak?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Vice Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee. Hello, my name is Polly Shaw. I'm the Chief External Relations Officer of Plus Power. Plus Power is an American headquartered, American invested developer, owner, operator of utility scale battery storage facilities. And I respectfully ask you to support HB 2083 to provide regulatory certainty to our emerging industry. First, a little bit about Plus Power. We are headquartered north of Houston. We were formed by the battery storage deployment leaders of a few companies in the 20-teens who saw a sweet spot to build standalone systems, not co-sited with generation. So our projects have about the same size of services as a conventional power plant, but in a small footprint of, say, 10 to 30 acres each. In fact, Plus Power built the first 3 100-megawatt projects in Texas in 2021. We now have 7 operating projects with 4 in Texas, 2 in Arizona, 1 in Hawaii, and 2 more coming online this year in Maine and Massachusetts, totaling over 4,000 megawatt hours. Behind those, we have over 50 projects in 28 states in development, including 2 in Kansas, in Labette and Saline counties. If you would allow me to explain the battery systems, as I relayed, Plus Power builds utility-scale standalone battery storage facilities, and you can think of them as an extension of electrical infrastructure, helping to modernize the transmission grid and make it more efficient and reliable in the face of extraordinary power demand from data centers and increasingly intermittent but cost-effective renewable energy additions. So our standalone systems are energy agnostic, supporting both conventional and renewable energy sources by reinforcing the grid wherever needed. We reinforce it all. Physically, battery storage systems are rows of 30-foot sleek white containers of lithium-ion batteries that are stacked and racked inside with a gel-based cooling system and internal computer controls and monitoring systems. Am I allowed to share pictures? Because I do have a picture. Sometimes I think an image makes it much easier to understand what I'm explaining.
Yes,
Is that
I think you can share your screen. There should be a button on WebEx down at the bottom center of your screen. we'll give that a try.
Okay, it will not allow me to do that, so I'll move on. But if you take a look at the pluspower.com website, there's some beautiful pictures that show you rows and rows of white boxes that are just doing their thing on the energy grids. These facilities, they have two major functions. First, they act like a sponge on the grid, soaking up energy when there's too much energy that's congesting the grid, when prices are low. And then they discharge energy when demand is rising and the prices start climbing. By storing and discharging energy, that helps shield ratepayers from high market prices. The second function is as a pacemaker or a shock absorber for the grid, performing the same grid services as a conventional power plant, but with 250 millisecond response rates. And so performing those essential services is how we would make money in the merchant energy market of Kansas. However, the regional Southwest Power Pool market has not yet devised new market products and revenue for batteries. So these are substantial investments that carry with them some investment risk. Battery storage systems are unique in that they can perform multiple services, and their biggest value is helping to keep the power reliable, which helps economic growth. As grids integrate these higher penetrations of variable renewable energy, batteries are the fastest resources to fill in when energy is short or the frequency regulation sinks. For example, at 7:26 p.m. on September 6, 2023 in Texas, some conventional power plants tripped off, causing the grid operator to consider the first rolling blackout since 2021 to protect the grid infrastructure. A call was put out for more resources, and 2,200 megawatts of batteries responded in less than a second, bringing the frequency back up to a safe 60 hertz and adding power onto the grid until wind production rose for the night. So that's why utilities and grid operators across the country are seeking more battery resources like the ones we are proposing in Labette and Saline counties. Our Saline County project, for example, can help bring West Kansas wind to the demand further east. For the community, these facilities bring substantial revenues to a local community via taxes or host agreements. Even more, our battery systems don't need water, nor do they emit air or light pollution or cause traffic or burden local services like schools or police. Kansas is very well placed to become a regional center for battery storage systems, from manufacturing to projects like ours to a skilled workforce in America's newest economic engine. It really is America's newest economic engine. We are proud to be moving ahead with 2 near-term facilities in the state. So as Kansas considers how to attract investments like ours, consider the decision-making stages of a battery storage project. Each battery storage system of the type we build represents $200 to $300 million investment. Early in the project's life, our leadership team and our financiers or investors review the project economics well before deciding to execute on millions of dollars of non-refundable grid interconnection deposits or equipment supply deposits. And of course, the project economics review the project's tax treatment. So while Kansas's tax code can be interpreted to suggest that battery systems qualify for a lifetime commercial and industrial machinery and equipment CIME exemption, there's no certainty until the project is built and reviewed by the Board of Tax Appeals. But to a business making a $200 or $300 million investment per project, we cannot wait to find out the tax status until after it's completed. So HB 2083 would clarify that our battery systems have a 10-year tax abatement similar to all forms of generation in Kansas. And while my company may be the first to visit with you on this subject, I'm confident the industry will seek this clarity too. So in conclusion, I hope I've illustrated the many benefits of battery storage to Kansas and I respectfully ask you to support HB 2083 to give the battery storage industry regulatory clarity. And in doing so, battery energy storage can help the state's economic growth goals, add to communities' revenue, and support Kansas's power reliability benefits. So thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate it. Have a quick question. Does the surplus power stay in Kansas, or are we giving tax breaks for power to be sent to other states?
It's a great question. Thank you. I cannot, there's no one who can speak to the control of electrons on a grid. They are impossible to trace. The point of doing standalone battery storage exactly where the transmission grid is having congestion or issues is to solve for that power reliability problem locally. But as I said, our projects are electron agnostic as to what type of energy is on the grid when we're soaking it up or discharging. But given the locality of, say, the project in Saline County, for example, I would expect that the electrons that are being influenced are really in the direct perimeter region around that project.
If I could follow up a little bit on that question, do you anticipate, I mean, it makes sense that the closer the demand is to these centers is where it would be utilized. Do you anticipate that these centers would be built more regionally across the state to serve geographic regions rather than concentrations? I mean, obviously you're going to have concentrations in areas of higher population, higher demand, but do you really anticipate we might see these throughout the state?
I do, of different sizes of batteries, doing different things that solve for different problems. For example, we specialize in projects that are larger than 100 megawatts that are on the transmission grid, solving for a specific problem at that place on the transmission grid. Competitors in the industry might be doing battery storage systems that are smaller, that fit on a distribution grid, that help fix congestion around homes and businesses or power quality issues that data centers really need to solve. And so the beauty of battery storage is that it can be quite small, residential, commercial, industrial, up to very large size. The harder thing to explain is how we can see where there is congestion on the grid that is not obvious to the layperson. So we are trying to find specific sites that either right now or soon into the future will be congested and will need the help. That's my company's business model.
Okay, thank you. Kimberly, did you want to add something?
Holly, if you don't mind, I may follow on, if that's okay. So I do think that we will see a significant amount of battery storage at various different injection points across the state. So the injection points being on the transmission grid or at the power plants themselves, maybe owned by the incumbent utilities or in some sort of agreement with the incumbent utilities. The battery facility in Minneapolis was designed to serve one role, and it's actually serving something completely different for Southwest Power Pool, which is really interesting. It was designed and intended to, again, as power was produced at low peak or at times of low need, to then store that lower cost energy and then dispatch it at times of higher need. That was the plan. And in all actuality, Southwest Power Pool uses it for voltage support in that particular area of the state. So, and again, that's a 4 megawatt project, so very different in size than what Polly is talking about, which is 100 megawatt hour plus. But that's the beauty of these different types of systems, is they do serve different purposes. But I do think that you will start to see them around the state in rural areas and in urban areas at different key injection points where we need to provide that voltage support, system reliability. That is entirely what they're all about. That helps.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Committee, any further questions? Representative Smith and then Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you help me out? 100 megawatts, I don't understand that. Can you tell me how many houses that'll light up or how much power that actually is?
Thank you, Representative. It depends on the usage of the Kansans, but I would be willing to say that a 100 megawatt sized project might power, say, 30,000 homes for the duration that the project was built for. As Josh described, some projects are built to be 2-hour systems. Some are built to be 4-hour systems. And as Josh described, if you have a 4-hour system of 300 megawatts, it means if you put all 300 megawatts out there, it would last for 4 hours. Of course, as Josh said, many operators don't put the full capacity out there. They might dribble it out, and therefore it can last longer because you might be doing different services with that power. Sometimes in Texas, we are only injecting electricity on the grid for 4 minutes and 41 seconds to help stabilize the voltage frequency and to do that one service. We might turn on later in the day to put energy onto the grid for, say, 2 hours between when the sun set and the wind came up. It just depends on how you want to use the system.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Turner.
Hey, thank you. So I was wondering, these probably don't employ many people at each site operationally. And secondly, who does operate them? I mean, they're not part of the utility necessarily, because I had asked earlier when it was presented, usually when a project like a solar or a wind is built, they've already sold the power, so they have a ready customer for the product. How do these work? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. In Plus Power situation, our business model is that we are the developer, owner, operator. We do not, in this case, in these two projects in Kansas, we would be operating in the merchant market, the Southwest Power Pool. We would be operating the system. We would be bidding into the market, and then we would have a qualified entity that is approved by Southwest Power Pool to transact the bid. When the bid is accepted, we would then discharge or charge whatever we had bid to do for that day. So we would be making the revenue, but we would be making the operating decision with the facilitative help of a qualified entity that literally does the transaction with Southwest Power Pool. Did that help answer the question? I'm afraid I might have forgotten the first part of the question.
Well, I asked about the number of people, any
yeah.
employees.
I apologize, Representative. You're correct. In the construction phase, it could be somewhere between 50 and 100 construction workers with high-paying jobs. After completion, these may have only 1 to 3 maintenance workers periodically coming to address vegetation or check on security systems and things like that. These are remotely operated, in our case by Plus Power. We intend to be the owner of these systems for the life of the system.
All right, committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your,
Thanks.
pardon me, Representative Wolf, we have one more question.
Thank you, Chairman. Back to disposal. What do you do when they're no longer viable?
Thank you, Representative. I intended to come back and answer your question, but wanted to be correct with process. The two recent federal bills, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, put an enormous amount of money through certain department agencies to start building a domestic recycling industry in America. Of course, 90% of batteries like we use they go to electric vehicles. Stationary storage like us uses about 10% of the batteries. So between the EV markets and the stationary storage markets, there will be growing demand for recycling facilities and services. There are two early commercial competitors that I can think of right now that are recyclers who claim that they can recycle more than 94% of the batteries because of the inherent value of the chemistries and metals in these batteries. So when we have to work with the county to get permit approval, usually it is at that stage that we're filing a preliminary decommissioning plan. And often in the process, we reach an agreement that we will continue to update that decommissioning plan. These systems, the systems we expect to have at least a 20-year, 25-year lifespan. The individual battery containers do degrade over time. And so we leave space within the project site for what we call augmentation, meaning that we just keep adding more batteries as the batteries degrade in order to maintain the expected performance as designed. So we don't plan to take batteries away from the system unless they're clearly faulty. The demand for recycling in our experience right now is extremely low. As these systems reach the end of their lifetimes, there will be a clearer picture on the national recycling industry offerings and services and prices. And so we intend to continue to update our decommissioning plans to be relevant to the industry as it sits at that time. But we do file decommissioning plans with the intent to recycle.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure who to address my question to. Perhaps the researcher or you even, Mr. Chairman.
Not if you want the right answer.
I understand that I'm going to ask this question on behalf of county commissioners in the state of Kansas sitting at home, maybe watching this. We understand there's a 10-year tax exemption, but since they're new technology, is there a systematic approach going to be used to actually determine their appraisal value at the end of the 10 years? So when they come onto the tax roll, we can know what to expect for taxes at that time. How do we go about finding that?
That might be a question to visit with Department of Revenue, Property Valuation Division, and see what they plan on doing with in comparison to the other states. Or
I know they've worked that out with wind farms and other 10-year tax exemption items, but this is new technology, and I didn't know if that would apply to this in the same manner.
yeah, that question probably has yet to be answered for sure. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I do show some written proponent testimony from Kansas Association of Counties. Was there anyone else wishing to appear before the committee as a proponent on House Bill 2083? Seeing none, draw the committee's attention to opponent testimony, written only. Is there anyone wishing to appear before the committee to provide opponent testimony? Seeing none, we will go ahead and close or I guess there's neutral. I didn't go over neutral. No neutral testimony. We'll close the hearing now on House Bill 2083. We'll move now, committee, on to House Bill 2098, and we'll turn to the reviser for an overview on that bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2098 would provide a sales tax exemption for purchases made by a not-for-profit corporation that is exempt from federal income tax and operates a theater in the state of Kansas that provides the following. Number one, the creation and production of novel works for concerts or productions. 2, the employment of full-time theater staff. 3, a board of directors and governance of the organization that provides a partnership between the board and the theater staff, and a connection to the community by ensuring sound business and financial practices, and a commitment to bringing new thoughts and ideas to the governance of the organization. 4, the dedication to providing strong educational commitments to the community in which such theater is located. And number 5, the commitment to providing ongoing live theater as an art form using available local resources. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. I guess I just have a question. We've seen this bill a couple of times. Has anything changed from the bill form from the prior year?
No, it's identical.
Identical, okay. Committee, any further questions for the reviser? See none. Thank you, Adam. I will let the committee review the fiscal note. It's the same as it's been in years past. It's a pretty small fiscal note, so unless anybody wishes, we will move on directly. Representative Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, I would like the fiscal note addressed, please.
Okay. I'll turn to Kathleen for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. We are estimating that House Bill 2098 would reduce state revenues by approximately $170,000 in fiscal year 2026. Of that amount, state general fund revenues are estimated to decrease by $139,000 and the state highway fund by approximately $31,000. We're also estimating it would decrease local revenues by approximately $61,000 in fiscal year 2026. And the fiscal impact would have similar results in the outgoing years as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Kathleen? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. At this time, we'll open up the proponent testimony and welcome first to committee, Angela Cassette. Welcome back.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about House Bill 2098. For those of you who are continuing service on this committee, if you're thinking her again, that is because, yes, this is year 4 of working on this legislation. I have had the pleasure of testifying before this committee in the past, and you have, in fact, passed this bill out of committee on 3 prior occasions. I will therefore keep my remarks brief as I ask you to once again vote to pass House Bill 2098. My written testimony includes a lot of detail on Music Theater Wichita's economic impact to our state. What I'd like to share with you here is that voting yes corrects a decades-long oversight where our state's nonprofit theaters are ranked as less worthy than other small businesses and other nonprofit organizations. To illustrate, in Wichita, there are several businesses of approximately the same size as Music Theater Wichita who are subcontractors for the aviation industry. When these companies purchase steel or fabric or tools, they do not pay sales tax. They sometimes pay sales tax on their end product, or sometimes pay tax on their end product. However, when Music Theater Wichita purchases steel for our sets or fabric for our costumes, we do pay sales tax, and then we pay taxes again on our end product, as our ticket sales generate approximately $150,000 in tax revenue for the state each year. And when it comes to equality with other nonprofits, if you individually decided to support educational programming through area nonprofits, you could give $100 to our wonderful science museum in Wichita, Exploration Place, to purchase batteries for microphones. And you could give Music Theater Wichita $100 to purchase batteries for microphones. Exploration Place would have $100 to spend, and Music Theater Wichita would have $93.50. We are so grateful for the work we do for the 1,700 children with special needs and their families who saw a show last year for free, for the 1,200 students from Title I schools who attended school matinees, and for the 50,000 patrons we serve each year. But producing theater is very challenging. Passing House Bill 2098 is a low-cost, high-return, impactful way for the state to even the playing field a bit and make what the nonprofit theaters do in our state possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Committee questions, Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Angela. Can you tell us a little bit about the youth program that you have at your theater there in Wichita?
Sure, I'll be really brief because I could talk about that for 2 hours and you all don't want that. We basically have programming for children as young as 3 or 4 up through our high school programming. Our high school programming includes throughout the state of Kansas. We actually get to come to many of your districts and see talent throughout the state through our Jester Awards program. And we do quite a bit locally with kids in the greater Wichita area as well. Mostly experiential, learning teamwork, basic skills. Some are of such talent and have the kind of interest where they are on a pre-professional track, and others, it's really about the social benefits and learning teamwork and creativity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you give us a number? How many kids are directly involved?
Probably 10,000 per year.
10,000. Wow. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Have a quick question. Just wanted to clarify. We are talking sales tax exemptions for the state and the local levels, what you're asking for.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're asking for a sales tax exemption on your purchases, is that correct?
That's correct.
But not on your ticket sales?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We will gladly continue to pay the sales
$159,000.
yes.
And how much do you estimate your purchases are each year?
Music Theater Wichita is probably the largest of the coalition, so we probably spend about $70,000 per year on sales tax on goods. Mostly that's steel, lumber, that kind of thing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome to committee Michael Spicer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. After coming so close to passage last session, we truly appreciate the tenacity of Representative Sanders and our supporters to bring this forward again. This bill is a direct reinvestment in these organizations and in the economies of the communities in which they exist. We realize that we are seen as very right-brained people, but to be able to run an organization, especially one like Music Theater Wichita or Salina Community Theater, you have to be very, very left-brained as well. We have to be able to construct budgets and create marketing and development programs. So we also have to integrate with the tourism in our region. Salina is a town of 50,000, and we have to have new audiences coming in from outside of Saline County in order to sustain our growth, and we have grown that from 30% a few years ago to over 40% now. We seek support for this not because of the art we create, but because of the residual value it has beyond our stages and because of the economic impact we provide to our communities. Speaking for Salina Community Theater, over the last decade, we've infused more than $9 million into the local economy and more than $320,000 collected in sales tax revenue on the tickets we've sold, which we will continue to collect. SCT sold tickets last year in 135 different communities throughout Kansas, so whereas most community theaters talk about their county and surrounding counties, we indeed cover the entire north central part and western part of Kansas. We also sold tickets in 25 other states. The theaters that create their own content are significantly better contributors to local economies. 90% of every dollar that comes into the theater remains in the community. Every dollar realized from this bill will be reinvested in the organizations, either in production or personnel. Oftentimes we're asked about education and about our alumni and what they're doing, and we do indeed have great pride in our alumni who are working on Broadway right now in Great Gatsby and Hadestown. We have people that are working in national tours of Chicago and MJ the musical, and also people who are working in technical theater at Disney World and Universal Studios. But we're equally proud of the other people that come back to the community and support the community theater. We had a student, an adult student in a dance class this past week who left class to go deliver a baby of one of her patients, and then she came back to class. And that's something we're incredibly proud of too, because these are people who grew up in our theater, go away and come back, and being a part of the theater and still participating in theater is incredibly important. And most people don't realize that. I stand for questions.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you, like all the community theaters across the state, were impacted by COVID. How have you recovered from that, and are you back to where you were prior to COVID?
We feel like last year was our first year of complete recovery. We have recovered most of our audience. We've seen our subscribers go down because subscribers tend to be more mature, and more mature people have decided that they're going to stay home more. But we've seen younger and broader regional audiences come to us, and that's exciting for us as well, especially seeing much younger people coming into our organization.
Committee, further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Smith.
That's all I had listed. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent on House Bill 2098? Seeing none, we will move on to neutral. Is there any neutral testimony to be offered? We do have one written opponent, or is there anyone wishing to appear as an opponent? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2098. And committee, we did have something come up. I have to have a meeting tomorrow. Hope not, I'm just kidding. Wow, the looks that I got. That does conclude our business for the week. We are adjourned.